So here we are, episode 7, and we're going to talk a little bit today just about the ideas of self-love or loving yourself and why that's so important, and then the slippery slope that gets into being selfishness.
Yeah, right.
You know. So let's just start. Why don't we? When you hear self-love, like, what do you think of?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's a tough one. Number one, I'll say that it is like one of the universal tenets. You know, I keep thinking of things as like the bifurcation of from the first question. Like, what are the first assumptions we're going to make about whatever we're doing? Like, okay, I exist. Okay, why am I here? Whatever. One of the very, very high level things I'm told is that if you're going to do anything in life, you have to love yourself first. If you're going to love anything, if you're going to have a positive experience on earth, it was like the conclusion from, I don't know, 75% of the interviews I did on Knowledge Plus Experience Equals Wisdom. It's what I've heard in therapy for 10 years. It's almost like somebody saying you need to meditate. I mean, it's almost so universally prescribed that it's pedantic, right? It's losing its meaning because people just hear it and go, oh, okay. So this is a really important conversation to have because what is it, you know? And I'll tell you, my personal story is that when I really faced with this question, it took me years to really sit down and think about it rather than just say, well, of course I love myself. Because it's like you say, everybody thinks they're right. Who's going to say I don't love myself?
Yeah.
Who's going to admit that publicly to anyone? And so I was like, maybe, you know, once I'm alone and away from my coach or therapist, I was like, do I? And then what I realized is I do absolutely, inside the sphere of my individualness. My problem with self-love, I struggle when I go out into the world.
Yeah.
Because then questions come up like, well, do they like me? What do they think about me? Do they think I'm worthy? I think I'm worthy, but what about these people? I don't play, you know, I don't do this, I don't make good grades, I don't do whatever, I don't have a nice car. Maybe they're not going to love me. So, you know, fundamentally it has something to do with this, like we talk about there being an individual side and a community side of existence, and so this is, I mean, obviously, it has to do with you as an individual.
So I wonder on the aspect of if somebody is asked, do you love yourself? If you're asked that in a public setting, of course, because I mean, if you're asked that
right,
question,
there's two people.
There's somehow two involved, even if it's online, which we probably should still talk about that aspect too. But even if it's online, there's at least two involved, maybe more. And I wonder how many people would, in that public interrelationship setting, is what's going on, would say, yes, I do love myself. And it's not therapy. Let's say it's not in the therapy.
Right. You're just in the,
it's just in it.
You're
Do
at the
you
mall,
love myself? But then, when they're by themselves, you know, or beating themselves up, you know, maybe, you know, calling yourself, you know, whatever, I'm a jerk, I'm an idiot, oh, I can't believe I did that, or you know, and being so like hard on yourself. And they, you know, my one friend, this goes back to the idea of the ego again, where a lot of people think of the ego simply as, oh, they have such an inflated ego, and it's so self-aggrandizing, and it's so big, like they got a big ego, whereas this one particular friend talked about, for her, it was the negative aspect of all the negative talk in her life to herself, about herself.
That was her ego?
That was the way her ego kind of controlled it, you know? And so, I mean, there's so many things here to go over on the self-love. But so one thing I think would be cool, we didn't exactly talk about this, but I think this comes up here with the self-love, because you'll see where this goes, is the idea that, so this was in Anita Morjani's book. I think the book is titled "What If This Is Heaven?" And I came across that book because I was doing a talk called "What If This Is Heaven?" So I just Googled that.
And you were like, this lady stole my idea.
and here it was that she already wrote a book about it. But so she tried to do some myths, and one of the myths was that just about us getting rid of the ego completely, or not needing an ego. And what she said about it is, think about it like this. You come into the world with two controls, 1 to 10, right? 11 if you're in
Spinal Tap,
right? 1 to 10, okay? And you have an ego and an awareness of others, okay?
Interesting.
And they both come in at 10 automatically, basically.
Right,
Now,
right,
of course,
right.
you wouldn't even, when you're that little, you don't even have that. You know, I mean, you don't know that at the time. But you come in at full 10. And then one or both are dulled over time.
Interesting.
And so they're dulled by, like you've talked about this throughout like your whole second part, particularly of the Knowledge Plus Experience Equals Wisdom podcast, of the shoulds of the world, right? So
the domestication process.
Yeah, the domestication process, right, yeah. So we start dulling the ego, right? That you're not as good, that you're worried about you're wrong, and all the negative self-talk that you're given to, or not self-talk, but all the negative feedback you're given about yourself. And then, because we're so inundated with so much information and the computers and cell phone and cameras, which we have right here, but we're so inundated with all that our awareness gets less and less and less, basically, right? Because there's so many distractions.
Yeah, it's
right?
desensitized in a way.
Right,
and
yeah.
It can't possibly process all of that, so.
Right, yeah. So then that's all dull. But so what you want is you want the full ego and the full awareness simultaneously, but it's simultaneously. Like that's the key. Like that's where you want. Because if the ego is higher than the awareness, now you come on like a self-aggrandizing.
Yeah.
I'm so special, I'm the best, whatever. But at the same time, it could go the other way if awareness of others, and I would say, so for my friend there, I would say, like, her awareness of others was a 10. It was an 11.
I'm in that category. A hypersensitive person, an empathic person, a people pleaser, a codependent. You learn to pay attention to other people in order to navigate your way in the world. And that's a classic, what I was getting at with, I love myself. But once those interactions start, the system breaks down because I have these neuroses like your friend. And I think it's pretty common.
Right, yeah. So okay, so for you that was it though, that you had the empathy for other people, you're trying to, or you're aware of other people, but almost to the point
my detriment of my own.
To the detriment.
And that's why, like, in my own terabithia, in my own shell inside my luminous egg, I'm almost arrogant.
Mm-hmm.
And I've actually been told that in job interviews where I have to sort of set myself up and give my best side or whatever and sort of, bring up more of that self energy that I come across as arrogant. Anyway, I'm convinced I do love myself. It's just it breaks down in the real world.
Right.
But keep going. I mean, I don't
no. I mean, I think that's super important.
Because what I see, that model's great, except I see both dials as being like going to -10 and +10 and being set at kind of a 0, neutral, and then being able to, because I see, like, again, there's a negative side to being overly codependent, overly sensitive to your environment, so that would spin this dial this way.
Yeah.
And I don't know where you want them to be set exactly.
Yeah. Well, maybe that is almost a way to think about it. I guess whatever you
and the ego too. We know there's a negative and positive aspects.
Yeah,
of that.
maybe it should be really more of a balanced thing. Well, 10 is the balance.
That's the other thing I think you said that was beautiful. Is it supports this idea that we literally are simultaneously individuals and a part of the whole.
Right.
We want to maximize both of those things at the same time, and doing one or the other is sort of like getting it wrong, so to speak.
Right.
And this is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, well, and finding that balance, of course, is kind of the most important thing, and I think it's so, when we hear terms like integration, like that's really what it is. It's integrating these different aspects. You're going to have these different aspects. So that's like just simply, you got to integrate those two things. Yourself with the whole, and that needs to be integrated together because you need to function as an individual in the whole, and the whole needs to function, which is all the parts.
And it's it's the oxygen mask first thing. I mean, again, if you don't keep your house clean, I don't know what other words for it besides love yourself first, you become a less capable or less good or less pronounced or less developed in your interactions with the rest of the world. So my ability to tolerate someone with an opposing opinion who's selfish and loud and mean is going to be lessened if I'm not fully and loving myself, right? So I won't be able to
Yeah, I think so.
show up in
Right,
the world.
right, yeah. Because, so if you, and that's a lot to why, you know, you hear things like, in fact, so in Don Miguel Ruiz, the four agreements, talks about don't take anything personally.
Yeah, right.
Because that other
Right.
person in the interaction has whatever's going on with them, right?
And it's egotistical to think it's about you. So if you do feel that way, you know your ego dial's probably turned on.
Right, right. Yeah, well, so, dude, I see that, and that's a good place to start, I think, of how to love yourself is the physical body, because it is the most base thing we have.
Yeah, and dieting and body
Yeah.
awareness and all that. Yeah.
So that's the most base thing, and what you were just saying, dude, that's so common. What I would see in the gym is people be like, oh, you know, I don't really like being in the group because other people are watching me.
Yeah.
I'm like, no,
Yeah.
they're not watching you. They're watching themselves. They're worried about themselves. They probably came into this place having the same feelings you did, you know, that they were worried about themselves. And then, you know, so in college, it's the college I went to, there was the experience of the walk of shame. And so
The universal one, I think you mean, with the walking home in the morning with
Right.
last night's clothes on.
Yes, right. And you know, but the interesting thing about the walk of shame, which obviously you could be super dressed up and walking home in the morning and look.
Maybe on a Sunday,
Yeah.
which would often happen on a Sunday. So
Maybe.
sometimes it was hard to tell.
Yeah, you could look. Yeah, you might look odd for whatever reason. But the bottom line is, I mean, if you just had regular clothes that you wear every other day, nobody knows what you do.
Yeah, no,
Nobody
it's
wants.
so true.
And you know, dude, here's so for me in my life, we've talked in earlier episodes kind of about your experience with, you know, using marijuana and stuff. But so I never really used it. I've experienced it a little bit in my life, but I didn't use it regularly ever, and I never even carried it. And then there was an experience in college where I had to carry some in a backpack across campus. Now, I walked across that campus, dude.
I know.
Every day.
I've had the same experience.
Every day, right? But why was I so nervous that day? Like, nobody checked my backpack. In however many years I was in that, you know, at the time, 3 years probably, two and a half years, or whatever, 3 semesters, 4 semesters, whatever it was. Nobody ever was like, hey, can I look in your backpack?
Right.
But this day, I was so nervous walking across campus. Now, whether it's right or wrong, but I had to do that.
Weed
that
makes
day.
you paranoid.
That's a whole.
Whether you're smoking
Right, it made me paranoid. I didn't even have.
Well,
to
but
use
that's
it.
a wonderful. that has a lot. That gets my wheels spinning, because that's so much related to the ego. Like, why do we trust our ability to sort of predict the future? And this is classic CBT. We can't.
CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy.
It's
right,
thinking we have a crystal ball and can predict the future. If I go to this party, nobody's going to talk to me because I'm a bad person and I'm going to have a terrible time. If I go to the gym, everybody's going to look at my body. You know, you don't know what people are going to do. Yet our ego goes, I know exactly what's going to happen here. The cop's going to come up to you and take that pot, and you're going to get kicked out of college.
Right. Yeah.
What's up with that? I mean.
Yeah.
And I wonder if, you know, if and I think this is true, something like self-love indirectly sort of solves that problem, because this is just pure speculation at this point,
Yeah.
but I have some evidence. You know, it's a black box of what's going on in the mind, but it's almost like self-love is it's like a protection mechanism, right? It's like meditating. If you develop this skill set to be able to remind yourself, no, you don't beat yourself up. This is the golden rule, and I love it. That's the other thing I wanted to say. When you said there's no loophole in the golden rule, I mean, you know, it implies that this also applies to you. You know, how you would have other people treat you. Think about that part of it first.
Right.
We tend to focus on, well, I'll treat everybody nice, because that's how I want to be treated, but you don't actually know what the second part looks like. But anyway, I think this is a good example of something that there's no clear-cut way. I can't sell you a book that says the 10 ways, you know, to self-love. All I can tell you is if you practice this skill, it's going to have, you know, exponential repercussions on your life.
Right. So there's not necessarily.
Somehow.
I think. Do you mean there's not necessarily specific actions in the world that you do for self-love as much as I would say there is a mindset though, which is what you're saying, right?
Well,
There's
exactly.
The operating system underneath
It's
is that you like love yourself.
Yeah, and I guess I'm trying to be encouraging because of my experience of doing things like this, and I would say meditation is like self-love in that you do this practice, you don't really understand, you know it's good for you, but you don't really, it's like, am I going to wake up tomorrow and look in the mirror and see Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Right.
That's what I want, that's what I'm expecting, as a good body image or whatever. But actually what happens is you just stop beating yourself up as much, and who would really say, I'm gonna make you do, if you exercise a whole lot, like the example, how many people exercise because they think it's gonna reduce their risk of heart disease as an adult? That is not an incentive.
Yeah.
For most people.
Yeah, that doesn't start being an incentive until it becomes a necessity.
Yeah. But that's
right?
like one of those delayed, if somebody said, eat this salad instead of this awesome greasy bacon and chicken and cheese sandwich because it's going to have it might have some small effect on how you feel in 10 years. People are going to be like, no. And that's kind of what I'm saying. Self-love is one of those practices that has these amazingly huge benefits that I don't know how. There's no direct causality.
Right.
So how do you sell that to someone? How do you convince someone that that's a...
Yeah, that direct causality, that's so interesting because I think about that. Like, so people smoking, like, I suppose you could argue that smoking causes cancer, but it doesn't in everybody.
No,
right?
George Burns, when I was growing up, that was our classic thing. George Burns is fine. George Brown, I mean, look at him.
Yeah. And so it does, so it's not direct. Whereas if things were more direct, it would be interesting how it'd be much easier to avoid this stuff.
Yeah, but
that's the negative.
That's the human condition. I mean, these are the challenges that we present ourselves with in life.
Yeah.
Will you be a good person and there be no possible chance of any payoff? Will you behave in such a way that may be difficult and challenging and there's no incentive? It's like I used to say when I got divorced and didn't want to beat up on my ex-wife, mostly for my own health, but for the sake of the kids and just the community.
Sure.
And I used to say the only benefit of being on the high road, there's only one, and that is to look down at the low road and go, I'm glad I'm not there.
Yeah.
That's the only incentive. And I'm not saying self-love is that kind of a difficult sell, but why, like you're saying, if there was some obvious thing, if you woke up in the morning and you looked in the mirror and you didn't have any imposter syndrome and you thought you were beautiful, everybody would do it.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work like that.
You've used imposter syndrome a couple times. Maybe we should kind of just define that a little bit to make sure.
Yeah, I hope it's not tangential. But
I don't think it matters. I mean, I think it's worth.
When I was in PhD school, I felt like I didn't belong there. I looked around and I saw all these really smart kids, and I went, I got F's on my grade report. I barely stayed off of academic probation. I was so close to failing out that I just went, I gotta stop, or I'm gonna spend another $5,000 and I'm gonna get all F's. Like, I suck as a college student. My professors told me, why are you even here, kind of thing. And so I got my shit together, went back to school. I got a 4.0 in my last 2 years and a 2.0 in my first 2 years, which averages out to be a 3.0. I wasn't a good student by any means. I smoked weed. I liked music. I felt like everybody around me was Einstein. Mm-hmm. And so I felt like I don't deserve to be here. And I happened to pick up a book one day that was like, so you're getting a PhD, and it was all about this. It was like the first self-help book I ever read. It basically said, Chapter 1, Imposter Syndrome. Guess what? I bet you're feeling like you don't belong here.
So it's likely all those people felt that, right? Yeah. So they were all going to walk the shame.
Same thing. Yeah. And that made me feel like, well, at least I'm normal. But again, it didn't make any of the pain go away. I had to teach myself that. Mm-hmm. But had that book made Imposter Syndrome disappear, I'd have paid $10,000 for it.
Right.
And we'd all be doing it. But so Imposter Syndrome is a thing where I think everybody thinks they're alone in the world and they're the only one with these problems and that they're different and they're outcasts and they don't deserve to be wherever it is that they are. Mm-hmm. And it turns out every coach and therapist I've ever worked with, and it's probably like a dozen at this point, has said, everybody says that. Right. Everybody feels that way.
Right.
Which is crazy. But
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, I think, so it's an important aspect of it all, I think, is that what would be called like the journey is the destination, right? Is that, you want this, we want a quick fix for a lot of things. We want the pill to lose weight. We want to go, I see where people be like, I'm gonna come to the gym twice a week and I'm gonna put on a bunch of muscle. I'm like, why don't we just give it a little bit of time? Let's ease into this. You're just starting to work out. And what happens usually with somebody like that, they come in, they work so hard the first day that they make themselves miserably sore, and then I don't see them again for a week. Then they try it again. They come in again. No matter how many times I'm like, listen, you've done enough. You've done enough.
Well, they think they know better,
and they, they do more, and then inevitably they fall off the wagon completely.
because you can't sustain that level.
Yeah. Well, you can't come in, and you have to build up to it.
It's not balanced. It's not sustainable.
Yeah, right. You have to build up, and so certainly there's people. So I think a lot of people think about balance as like an equal proportion of stuff, but balance is relative to your ability to handle something.
Sure. You've got a customized schedule.
Yeah.
Somebody like my brother is, I don't know about now because he's 63, but when in his mid-50s, he didn't run at all. He wasn't running at all. He wasn't training.
Okay.
One day it was like, I'm going to run a marathon.
Yeah.
And he ran it in like 3.5 hours.
Just
not everybody can do that, but that's him.
Yeah.
He would have been on a different schedule, which makes it hard because it's difficult for you to sort of say. But that reminds me of Atomic Habits. Related to all this, the one thing that I've sort of read that's fairly definitive is the James Clear's Atomic Habits. It's almost cliche to even talk about because it's like, the most popular book of the last 5 years. He basically said that's not how you do it.
Right.
He told a story about a guy who was overweight and he struggled with it for like 15 years and kept wanting to go and kept trying stuff like that and failing. And somebody told him one time, like, why don't you just join a gym and go in, however many days, 3 days a week, and sign in, and then leave.
Yeah.
And then maybe, after a few weeks, like, go to the water fountain and get a drink. And the guy did that.
Yeah.
And then eventually he was like, well, I'm already here. I might as well use some machines. And eventually he built into the habit. And finally, for the first time in his life, developed a healthy exercise regimen.
Right.
But it was by building tiny little incremental changes over a long time. We don't like those things. The antithesis to the smoking gun or the whatever you said, the magic bullet.
Yeah. So I think James Clear, he talks about like 1%. Like if you have 100 factors too, and you can change all of those factors.
Yeah, that's another thing we do.
1%.
Yeah.
Like that little incremental thing.
Well, yeah,
makes a difference.
It's the exponential gain versus the exponential decay model. I mean, he shows the two figures, and they're brilliant, and I can't even describe them and recreate them, but if you look at a 1 minute or 1% gain through time, it's like compounding interest. The number gets bigger and bigger, and so the 1% gets bigger and bigger, and all of a sudden it just shoots to the moon.
Right.
Whereas if you drop 1% a day, it's at zero in like a week.
Right.
And so building a habit is rewarding, but it's really slow and painful until you build up enough money in that account to. You put $1 in the bank and gain $1 interest, it takes forever.
Yeah, dude, we talked about this on the last episode a little bit, the idea of fake it till you make it, and I think that somehow that term got misinterpreted because that's almost it. You're not what you want to be exactly, right? Mm-hmm. So like I want to be a runner. Okay, so I'm going to start, and so first of all, what does that even mean? I want to complete a 5K. Okay, let's just say it's that. I want to complete a 5K race, right? And I'm starting from zero. So, and there's even programs like Couch to 5K.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So when you're starting, in a way, you're not a 5K runner, so you're faking it. Right? You know what I mean? You're not.
Yeah.
But you start doing something, and maybe that first day is almost like the guy going to the gym. Like, well, I went outside and I walked for a minute.
Yeah.
Or 5 minutes, or I ran for a minute, or whatever it is, the incremental, and it builds up, but it has to start like somewhere. And I think, so to try to keep somewhat on where we're going,
I think it's
loving yourself, the best, maybe not the best place, but a great place is your body. Because that is something that you can control.
I've come full circle on this too, because when I was really athletic and a skateboarder, I was smoking cigarettes and weed all the time, and I didn't agree with people who said there was a fitness element, because nobody had proven that point yet. Nyjah Huston and Paul Rodriguez had not come on the scene yet. Guys who really dieted and exercised and worked at it and became world champions. Nobody did that. It was almost like, and so yeah, I didn't. When people said your body is your temple, it made me cringe. But now, full circle, circuitously, I've come to the realization that yes, I probably should have started with my body instead of finishing up on it. But yeah, because it's true. Everything trickles down out of a healthy body.
Well, and so it's a great place to start, and the idea of loving yourself, again, and you touched on this earlier, it depends for you to participate in the rest of the world, for helping others, for maybe some people would call it like selfless service. For you to participate in that, you need to be functioning to do that. And so that's what, like you said about putting the gas mask on first. Like, you have to put your gas mask on first in order to do that. In order to help somebody else.
Totally.
Right? So that's like so important, and the body's like a great way to do that, I think. And nutrition's the base of that all. And you think about that, that's even probably more fundamental than exercise. Like, what are you putting in your body?
And it's also a great example because none of us see the correlation between not eating Doritos and eating a salad and the expression of that in cells that do their jobs better.
Right, yeah.
We go.
Like what's going on behind the scenes?
I ate a salad and I still got a cold.
Yeah.
It's this multivariate, the ecosystem of dominoes, and so without the cause and effect, we don't believe it.
Right. Yeah. Without that immediate impact, then again, right, is that's what's tough on that. So 3 things I think that are important in terms of loving yourself is one is just believing and telling yourself that you deserve love. Matthew Kahn, who's an interesting kind of spiritual teacher, he always ends his talks, or maybe in the middle of his talks, I don't even know, he says, you deserve more love, not less. And I think that's an important thing to remember. And the second thing, so you deserve love. Like, you're a unique person, you're here, you deserve love. Like, nobody does not deserve love. And the second thing is that starts by you telling yourself the truth, right? Like, I think, like, honesty is obviously, to me, fundamental. But I think we lie to ourselves more than we lie to anybody else. And you think about that, and I almost think on that one, not to go too far down the road on honesty. I'll real quick say the third one is forgiveness. So you deserve love. You have to be aware of that. You have to believe you deserve love. You have to tell yourself you deserve love. You have to tell yourself the truth. That's imperative. And then the third part is forgiveness. You have to forgive yourself for what you've done. And it's more on your end. Now, forgiveness also goes the other way, too, but you better forgive yourself for the things that you've done in order to forgive others. And that's the same thing as the golden rule. Like, if you don't love yourself, you don't have anything to love, to give. Like, how do you give something you don't have? So you have to love yourself for the golden rule to work, you have to love yourself. You deserve love, you have to tell yourself the truth, and you have to forgive yourself, because in order to forgive others, you have to do that, too.
No, that makes perfect sense.
Now, the thing on telling the truth to yourself is we lie to ourselves more than we lie to anybody else. And worse, I think, than anything is when you have time to, like, you lie to yourself first, even when you lie to somebody else. Like, you made the story up in your head first, right?
Yeah.
So you're like,
you felt like you had to do this because of this, which is a lie.
Yeah. And so, there was a situation a couple years back in a pro football game where the player took his helmet off and swung it at the other player. Okay. And he got suspended, of course. Thankfully, he didn't make contact with the guy. And later it came out that he said that the other player used the N-word on him. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I will never know that. And, and as far as I know, I've never seen anything else come out on that. There was, here's the sound gun that they could do. There's no proof on this. And so 2 things. I hope that the guy didn't use that. The player, right? Why he said that. But almost as bad it would be if that player that swung the helmet sat around and thought, well, this is the way I'm going to get out of this.
Yeah, right.
Like that now he's lied in it. It's crazy enough, like in the heat of the moment, he swung the helmet. That's not good. I'm not saying that's good. But that was the heat of the moment, a spur reaction. This happened and this happened. But now you're defending yourself and you sat around. It's more forgivable than the lie that's on top of that. You've sat around and thought about it. And that to me that's a really important piece of telling yourself the truth. It is not lying to yourself first in order to get out of another situation.
But it's also interesting because someone could argue that that's his way of loving himself and forgiving himself by making up a lie so that he can make himself believe. Now, it isn't the right way, and it should be noted that we're not advocating. And I guess that's why the second.
Well, so that would be. So what I would say about that, right? Though that would be his way of protecting the negative aspect of his ego, right? That he needs to protect his. So instead of owning his thing, this is what I did. I take full responsibility for my actions. Like that's what I did. Like and it doesn't matter. Like and again, and so because then that's where forgiveness happens. Listen, this is what I did. Right, because so that's an important aspect of forgiveness is like forgiveness requires that a person, maybe it doesn't require it, it's important that the person does take responsibility for their actions, right? But once they take responsibility for their actions in a situation of seeking for forgiveness from someone, you have to grant them forgiveness. They have done that, and your only option is to forgive them, no matter what. It doesn't mean that you have to still hang out with them or be with them or anything like that.
Or even approve of whatever.
Yes, right. It doesn't mean you approve, but you have to
condone.
Yeah, because really, you're going to be forgiving.
Well, I think that's all inherent in that second tenet, that it's the truth. I mean, because, but the problem is, that's a whole other suite of 10 episodes. Is like, what is the truth?
Yeah, sure. Well, that's something that I think we definitely need to go towards, on what is the truth and absolute truth. We need to get towards all those.
But I still get hung up, and you said this last week on that first tenet. Like, what is your exact wording?
On
about
today?
Yourself, like
just loving yourself starts with like, did you deserve love?
Yeah. So knowing you how, like, I get stuck on that. Like, okay, convince me. Like, I'll sit there and argue. I can argue with someone infinitely. No one is ever going to convince me that is the truth or a fact that I deserve love.
Yeah.
It isn't. It doesn't make any sense. I mean,
or
I guess it does make sense. I want it to be true, but it's like magic. It's almost like saying, you just have to trust me. You just have to believe it. Yeah. You just have to figure out your own way. It's one of those things that it drives me nuts because it sounds so simple, and you tell somebody, it's like I suffer from misophonia, so certain sounds send me into a lizard brain fight or flight mode.
Okay.
Crunching potato chips, popcorn in the movie theater. If it's not, now, a lot of times I have gained some control over it, and I can do things to sort of, but sometimes I have no repercussions. I have to leave. Or I get angry. And so my dad, when I was a kid, would just say, just don't hear it. Just don't hear it.
Right. But it's not
and that would put me in like a shame spiral because it's like, I can't not just.
Yeah, well, I mean, isn't that like, don't think of a green elephant?
Isn't that kind of like. But I really I had the pre existing condition. It wasn't like you asked me and I thought about it. I mean, Or it's like when I was getting divorced, somebody said, just get over it.
Right. Yeah. That's
just get over it.
Right.
I mean, like weeks in, like my wife just, I found out she's cheating on me. I've got 3 kids. My entire life is just taking a detour to God knows where. And you say, just get over it.
Right.
If I could do that, I would. So just love yourself.
Right.
Wouldn't everybody be doing it? Wouldn't we all be walking around without imposter syndrome?
I think this is where you can use some of the other, and we haven't really talked about this, but like reverse the roles. Okay, so if you don't think you deserve love, do you think anybody deserves love? Which I'm guessing you probably do. Now, maybe there's somebody.
No, I think most people probably do just that.
Yeah, and I've even seen people kind of say things like, I'm so lucky to have my wife, husband, spouse, whatever, significant other, that they love me more than I deserve.
Yeah, they put up with all my crap.
Or I could never love, that they taught me how to taught me how to love. That may be true,
Or
it
you
may be
learned
true.
how in her presence or
Yeah.
their presence.
Yeah, but somehow you better have been, and you have to think like in this, is the divorce rate in the whole world 50% or just this country?
Nobody knows.
Okay.
Those data do not exist.
So nobody
It's all
even
a
knows.
guess.
It's all
We
a guess.
assume it is.
Yeah. So, but I mean, if let's just say it is 50%, right? So there's 50% of relationships that people have at one point committed to each other, and
then stopped.
then
Changed
stopped for whatever reason. If that's true, is it true to an extent? In some, because the one. Neither person maybe loved themselves.
Yeah, right.
Because they weren't honest with themselves
What's the
completely.
correlation?
I think about that for my one friend. He was with a girl through most of college or whatever, a significant part of college, and then after college, I think it was a lot. And I hope I'm not putting words into his mouth here, but like I think a lot of it was like, well, he was together, and the thing to do is like after you graduate college, you get married.
Domestication. That's right there in the book.
Right, and that's what you do next. And then they didn't really last that long. And, I think that was a case where if he was truly honest with himself, or maybe it was her, or maybe both, right? So it could be either one. Okay, if either one is not completely honest with themselves, and or both, worse, right? It probably isn't going to work, And see, that was something, to me, dude, I felt like when Shelly and I got together, so now I'd never officially been married before, but I'd been in relationships where long enough to be married.
Everybody's broken up.
Yeah. And, when her and I got together, so she was in theory dating a guy like in California. A lot of it, and she would say this too, is that she was running away from life. She, like college experience was over. What do I do? I'm living at home with mom and dad at the time. I've met this guy. I'm moving to California because that gets me out of this situation. You're running away from yourself. And I mean, and I did that very thing hiking one year where I was trying to, so I have 3 1,000-mile trips on the AT, and this would have been after 2 of them. And AT is the Appalachian Trail, if anybody doesn't know, but I was trying to hike the whole trail in 100 days, and I was physically fit to do that.
Wow.
And I started out, and I was, just going really fast, and I wasn't really, anybody I met, I was blowing right by them, so I wasn't getting any of that kind of experience. But really what it was is I was running away from myself. That's what it was. Like, I wasn't being honest with myself, okay? In the relationship I was in at the time, I wasn't being honest with myself. And I thought that relationship, that I needed to be in that to define myself. So again, I wasn't being honest with myself because I wasn't loving myself.
And you didn't
truly.
know.
Yeah.
You may have just believed that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's...
Right. Well,
with the forgiveness.
And again, you can go back to, but as you look back, you realize that's what you were doing. And so when Shelly and I got together, one of the things, like, we'd go out, whatever, to a movie or whatever it is we did, and probably most likely just had drinks, but, she would be like, well, I'm still moving to California. Well, okay. But she told me the truth. Like, this is still my plan.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it wasn't like, oh, some kind of, I love you, I want to be with you, and I'm not going to be with him, right? You know what I mean? And then the next day I'm changed my mind again. I'm not going. It was always, I'm go, and then it was, so it's always honest. And I mean, that's hard, man, though, to be honest all the time. But like, man, you just got to, that's where it starts.
Well,
that's just, it's
I think there's
so
two things operating here, and this may be skipping ahead, but in answer to sort of my question, and sort of in light of that example, you have to believe in these tenets. You have to have faith in something in order to conclude that you are worthy of love. I think it's a blind leap, and I think it might be. I'm convinced that there's like a unique set of struggles for overly analytic people, or like very empirical. Science ruined me. It tricked my brain into thinking in a certain way that analysis is like the best way to solve a problem. And it's a good way to solve some problems, but it isn't a very good way to solve these problems. These problems are solved by things like faith. You have to have faith in a tenet or a rule or a belief that you deserve love.
Yeah.
Unless you believe that as a thing that exists without the need to be explained or to have a core or to have a cause. It doesn't have to be God, doesn't have to be anything woo-woo. It just has to be. You really can't get past that. And then once you do, it's like you put all of that pain and worry and non-self-love, whatever that is, into that.
Yeah.
It comes down to faith.
Well, so I think, dude, a lot, like when you say it that way, it makes me realize that, so one is, if we use, I can't remember if it's tenet or precept, but either way, if there's a slight difference between a tenet and a precept, but
I don't know.
The idea is that any of these actions, things that are running in your mind, are guidelines to behavior.
Yeah.
Right? It's
right.
not a dogmatic, like it has to be this way.
That's what... yes.
Yeah, this is a guideline, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, man, you're coming down the path, and this is the guideline here. And sometimes you're going to be over on this side, and sometimes you're going to be over on this side, or whatever, and it's like, can this guide my behavior at this time? Now, if you are living a life where you are, I'm going to start by just saying perfectly happy, okay? If you are perfectly happy all the time, then probably whatever you're doing is working. Right?
Right.
Now, first of all,
there's no reason to believe different.
Yeah, there's no reason to believe different. But if you think that there's some things that you would like to be better about yourself, you would like to see the world would be better, for whatever reason. And, if you think that so you can be better and collectively we can be better, okay, these are some guidelines to incorporate in your life because, again, as we've talked about like 50 times, like you can only control your own actions. So that starts with you. So you come back to yourself to do. And so then I think this is an important part, though, of the loving yourself is a lot of people then think that self-love is like doing whatever they want to make themselves happy. Yeah, and that's not it either. And that's the story of, we talked about it a couple episodes ago, of Rocky in the Twilight Zone, where he went to what he thought was heaven, getting everything he wanted all the time. Didn't make him happy.
And it's funny when you say that, because I want to be like, do people really believe that?
believe
that meeting all their hedonistic needs is what we're talking about. But I guess there are some people that do. Right. There's lots of people out there.
Yeah, well, I think that kind of operates a lot under the YOLO, you only live once, right?
Right, which is.
I think there's a balance of that. Like, by all means, like, live your life. And so, I mean, you could say, like on my hiking trips was very much of a you only live once kind of thing. That I decided that at this point in my life, it was more, not more important, but it was like, this is an opportunity for me to go do this. I want to do this.
Right.
I'm not in a relationship that I need to stay for. Of course, I still don't have kids, but I don't have kids depending on me. A couple of hikes I had my dog with me, kind of thing.
And I can see where somebody would argue that it's not necessarily, it could be a selfish act, like somebody who does nothing but hike all the time by themselves. All right. If they've got a wife at home or a partner at home that they're denying or whatever, then that's selfish.
Well, that's, I think, the way, and see, this is what gets so complicated, because it's like, so you're pretty much anything goes as long as, so this is where addictions would come in too, we were kind of talking about this off air, are all addictions negative? Well, is it impacting somebody negatively? So yourself first.
Yeah.
Okay, so clearly, like drug addictions, where, you are literally dependent on the drug. Like, you cannot function without it.
It's messing up your body.
Alcohol addiction, messing up your body. And most likely those things then are messing up your relationships, too. Because that's what happens, right? They're destroyed.
Well, I think if you were ever going to consider that something might be an addiction, then that's a pretty good indicator that something's going on. And whether or not it's causing you or anybody else pain, what it's saying is that perhaps you have an attachment to this activity that could be modified in a way that's going to have a more positive effect, or it's just a challenge. Like I quit drinking beer sort of like a month ago. I didn't do it for any particular reason. Like,
Okay.
I didn't feel, I sort of, but I thought about it. And I think a lot of people who use alcohol do this. You go, I wonder if I drink too much. I wonder if I had too many beers. I wonder if this is bad for me. As soon as you do that, it's sort of like, well, you're getting into you got the question.
Yeah.
There's only one way to answer the question.
Right.
It's not thinking about it. It's do something about it. Why don't you find out?
Right.
It's that evident.
Yeah.
And that's what I like about what you're saying is the evidence, the Bible, all of the religious doctrines, the Celestine prophecy, the Dan Millman's The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, the Toltec beliefs, the many indigenous, they all point at these, like you said, they're not definitive rules or laws, they're guidelines that sort of say, hey, we have found over millions of years of evolution and experience with other humans that if you make an effort to love yourself and can believe that, then it leads to positive results. That's what the record shows. That's all I'm saying. Which is both like extremely wishy-washy and inconclusive. There's no causality, there's no smoking gun, there's no silver bullet, there's no magic pill. But at the same time, it's encouraging.
Yeah.
Because it's meaningful.
And I think, so what's important to then the next step or to think about is that anything you do, okay, that thing you're doing is not going to make you permanently happy, right? It might provide you like, a moment of satisfaction, of pleasure, of enjoyment, create great memories on a vacation or something like that. But so factored in, so you have like that aspect, you have to factor in, are my actions harming other people? And that's complicated, right? As we've talked about, because like, who knows on, and I'm not even oh, well, I'm going to go out and, I just really want this shirt and, I'm just treating myself because it's going to make me feel better. And then really the shirt's made in a sweatshop, which this one I have on might be. I don't know, and that's so complicated and trying to.
Yeah, you can't know everything. Like you never can have all the information.
Yeah, right. Trying to do the right thing. But I think that, that happiness is not created from the outside in. Sure. It has to be
same blood, yeah.
And because you could do, so two people could do the same thing. Man, there's a great commercial. I can't remember who it is, and it's funny because of course why am I even watching TV to see this? But it was like I want to say it was maybe a car insurance commercial, and they have
a good chance of it.
Two people. Yeah, right. They have two people. One, their car was in an accident or like a tree fell on it, and the other one got a new car. Right, so they need insurance. So one person needs their insurance to come through. This one needs their new car to be covered, but they both react like the girl comes out with the new car, she's like, oh my god, and then the person at the car get the tree's like, oh my god, and they say the exact same things throughout the commercial. Like whoever wrote that commercial is a genius, really, because they said the exact same things, but the two different feelings were and experiences was associated with them. And so that outside influence does not create what goes on in the inside,
Right. Right. Well, yeah. Well, yeah, that's your...
And so that's what would be called like destination addiction, that you're always thinking that the grass is greener, that like it's the next big trip that's going to make me happy, it's the next partner that's going so I'm in a relationship and it's not good. And it could just not be good for lots of reasons. But if you're not happy with yourself, then that next person is not going to make you happy either. And it's probably going to work for a while, especially because if you're physically attracted, there's going to be like a sexual, pleasure kind of time where it's like, oh, it's fun being with this person or whatever.
Well,
but then ultimately you two have to get along to do that.
And I thought about when you're saying that and earlier too, that you could have two people who love themselves or don't love themselves in equivalent ways who could coexist in one of these very long-term relationships. And I think that happens probably in a lot of marriages where neither person really loves themselves. They both have these issues, but the issues are similar enough to where they don't create enough dissonance to get divorced. You just keep doing it. Like we're both drunks and we both have great sex, and that's enough to keep me interested in this relationship.
This way.
But I don't really have enough care about myself to want something better, and neither do you. And so it's interesting to think about that there could be a situation of non-love that works.
I think that's why these like precepts or guidelines, man, of like this, and so you have to just, because everybody's individual. Is it working? for you. And then, so first, is it working, right? And then you could go on, and this is complicated, to make the judgment, is it good or bad, right? This works, right? But is it really good or bad? And then is it sustainable to, would be the next aspect. And I think, so what we want is what our desire is. And I would argue that like part of, so what we want is a state of equanimity, like an equanimity of being, right? And in that state, you're going to have the calm state of mind. It's what you talk about. For me, a lot, I think of peace. I mean, that's kind of where I think of that. And you're going to have like an even composure then. And it doesn't matter what happens to you, good or bad, you're going, and it doesn't mean that you don't experience that and have it doesn't mean you don't get angry, you don't get sad, and you don't get happy.
You're still human. We still live in the universe.
You still have those feelings. It's just that your being, your equanimity of being, is going to remain the same, and you're going to maintain your composure whether you are sad or happy.
It's homeostasis, like we mentioned last time. It's the
right,
and we're looking at it wrong. Like what we seek out is not. And I don't. Maybe you need to define equanimity, because the only way I can define it to myself is very metaphorical, which is the day may be cloudy. There may be clouds in the sky, or thunder and lightning, or a gross mess. But the sky is always blue.
Okay.
In the day, and it's stars at night. There's always a steady state of existence that exists regardless of what is happening, and remembering that is the way things are. Makes it easier to sort of navigate.
Yeah, so that's almost a way to think about that too, right? The steady state. The clouds are the emotions going by.
Right, that's the stuff, and that's just normal stuff.
Yeah, and it's just
and the way that I react to those can either be, oh my God, there's clouds, or oh, I know it'll be sunny again.
Yeah,
I'll enjoy this while it's happening because it's different.
Well,
but is that what equanimity is? Like,
yeah,
is that
well,
a way to define it?
Yeah, I mean, I think equanimity of being is maintaining your composure, in all situations. It doesn't matter if you're, happy or sad. So you don't let your emotions get the best of you. And so it's finding the balance, the homeostasis.
Well, I can't help but get away from what I've taken out of this episode so far is this idea that, that faith and belief are really, for me, going to be my anchors for remembering self-love that I just have to, when I come up with a question or evidence that is in opposition to that thought, I just got to remember, this is not an evidence. This is not how there's no argument here.
Right.
We've already made this assumption.
Yep.
Keep that. And so it's just a matter of it's funny how it doesn't become, I want to be happy. It's more, I want to not be unhappy.
Yeah.
It's not about searching for the things that we want. It's about learning to remember the things we don't want are just fleeting.
Yeah, right. So it's the essential versus the non-essential, basically. The essential is or the non-essential is all the negative aspects that are going to negatively impact us. But they can be the things that, again, nothing's going to make us happy coming in, right? So
that's not how
and
it
so
works.
Everything, again, it comes back to that idea of the present moment, and the idea that you hear this saying a lot, it is what it is. It is what it is kind of, it kind of gets overused now too, but what happened is what happened. Your reaction to it is something else. And it doesn't matter whether you think that's right or wrong. This is what happened. And so I think this is a tough thing to understand. For whatever reason, we're here on Earth in this moment. Mm-hmm. Now, all through recorded history, not everybody, but there's recorded history of people thinking that the end of the world is nigh, right? Yeah, it's around the corner, right? And everybody thinks then, or it's talked about these are it's clear that the end of the world is right around the corner, and this is going to happen. Well, that's been thought of for 2,000 years now, okay? And sooner or later,
at least, who knows?
Somebody might be right on that, right? Sooner or later, that's what's right. Yeah. And I'll tell you,
they won't be. Yeah,
man, dude, there's a Dave Matthews song where he says, and so I'm not ripping on religion. We've talked about that. But it's like the levels of attachment to the religions is a problem a lot. But he says something like, God is troubling when believers would welcome the end of the world. And it's like, man, that's it, dude. Like, this is it. Like, we're here now, no matter what else there is. Right now, again, like, for the record, I do believe that there is more to life than just this moment, physical experience. But if there's not, well, we're here right now, right? And it doesn't matter. So it always comes back to
I find
this.
some peace in that, and remembering. It's a useful. I mean, it's like the Toltecs had death as an advisor. You should always keep death or some future moment as a reminder that it exists out there, but it doesn't matter right now,
right?
Because you were here now,
right?
And that somehow helps you sort of navigate and be more in the moment, because the next one I could be dead.
Right.
So that's useful, but
And then again, and that's like almost like maybe the perfect way to wrap this up, because there's the balance. There's the balance of knowing that this is a finite existence that we're in currently. So that's the end. We know that that's coming. But I need to function in society, and as being one part of the whole, we can't do things to the detriment of the other parts of the whole. You know what I mean? That's what, and again, I think I've talked about this. That was a big thing for me, is I want to do the things that to the best of my ability, because that's all you can do. And that's another Don Miguel Ruiz for agreement, right? Is do things the best you can. So to the best of my ability and understanding at the moment, I want to eliminate the aspects of my life, my ego, so to speak, that cause negative impacts on myself and others.
And feed that. And for me, it's like a conspiracy theory. Like, I hear these conspiracy theorists that are like, what is the crazy stuff about, like, the Democrats are actually lizards and they eat babies in the basement of some school? I mean, it's, and I'm all about conspiracy theories, but if you're going to believe in something, make it something worth believing in. Something that's worth me believing in is that I am worthy of self-love. That is there's nothing but wins if I choose to believe in that. And so why not try that out in this moment, and then maybe in the next moment, and see what comes of that, right? I mean, that's...
Well, and so then once you love yourself truly and understand that you deserve love and are telling the truth to yourself, now you can tell the truth to other people.
Exactly, and they can experiment.
And they can experiment. And that's how the Golden Rule works in actuality, and that's why there's no loophole, because it involves... The Golden Rule requires both people, like, not just your perspective.
Right.
That's
when you said that, I mean, it changed my... There's a couple of things you've said that I really like.
And see, and we've talked about this a little bit, and I think it's just worth one more mention, or 20 more mentions, though, is that if you have something to say that is of value, somehow it is so you've, so to speak, developed more than this other perspective. If you attack that other perspective, you just validate their fears.
Right. You punch it down. And punching down, you...
Yep.
What's the opposite of elevate? You've moved back.
Yeah, right. You've digressed, I guess, right? You've digressed yourself, and then you're just proving to be just...
And that's probably how you actually make the steps forward, right? You go, hey, this is cool. Oh, look at that idiot. Oh, wait, I'm back where I was.
Well, because that's that, in reversing that role in the moment, like, oh, wait, I can't do that. He's not an idiot. Because what if somebody's developed above me?
And reverse the role and the golden rule, not to again beat this up, but that's a good way to practice the self-love. Is sort of like what people say in therapy, like, well, how would you treat your best friend this way?
Right.
Like, why are you beating up on yourself like this? Why are you choosing not to love yourself? Would you choose not to love your best friend?
Yeah, a lot of people
do anything to deserve that.
Take care of their pets better than they take care of themselves.
Right. So the golden rule, the idea that you've got to have faith in something, you might as well have faith in something that's worthwhile, and then what have we just said? Tenets of, or reminders of why and how we can
Yeah, guidelines.
Yeah, practice
guidelines.
self-love.
Guidelines to do. Well, yeah, those are. I guess those would be guidelines too, or precepts. Precepts to do it, right? You know that you deserve. You remind yourself you deserve love, and then it starts with honesty for yourself, and it starts with forgiveness for yourself, and that goes the next way. And maybe, I don't know. Maybe the next show we should talk about forgiveness more. You know, in different ways that can go. So, or we can get into kind of more of the idea of what reverse the roles really means.
Yeah, I
like
mean,
how do I think?
I
of the other
find
person?
myself like coming back to the idea of reverse the roles a lot as a mechanism that people can implement in their daily lives to move toward a more
Yes,
equanimous.
it's yes.
existence.
That's right. Equanimity of being. Yeah, right. Yeah, the homeostasis. Two more. Yeah, reverse the roles to develop that and remain in that equanimity of being. And that's what we desire. And I'll talk a little bit more about that the next show. Is that is a desire. It's the last desire it's the only desire we truly have. Mm-hmm. Like everything else falls under that.
Well,
like that's what we desire.
Then that's what we should talk about.
Anything else we mistake. Cool.
Awesome.
All right. So hopefully the sound on this is good. If the sound wasn't good, we apologize.
We apologize, but it's worth listening.
And just you have to focus your mind and listen.